Hi, welcome. Hope you all enjoyed having a little break. Welcome back. It's time to get started on Unit 2. So congratulations, yeah, making it this far. 1 unit down, 2 to go. This unit's going to be focusing a lot more on the web and the internet and that kind of thing. Yeah, we're going to get started learning about some important web-based topics today. The format is going to be more or less the same for what we did for Unit 1, although some things will be a little bit different. We're still going to do walkthroughs in class. The walkthroughs are going to be very much related to the studio, so the studios are often going to build on the stuff that we do in class. So it's pretty important if you want to complete the studios to come and participate during the in-class walkthroughs. And we're actually going to be building an app together. By the end of this unit, we'll have a fully functional web application. We're not going to start that for probably another week or so. We've got a little bit of groundwork we need to cover first, but that's kind of what's coming up on the radar. But for the most part, we're going to stick with the formula. We'll do a little review session at the beginning for an hour or so, and then you'll split up into your groups and you'll work on a studio for the rest of the time, and then we'll do a little studio review to wrap up the day. So not much is going to change in regards of the structure or the flow of the course. There are assignments that are going to be posted as well. In fact, your first assignment, I believe, has already been posted. It's due a week from Sunday, I want to say. So you got some time. It's due on the 28th, you said? That's 10 days, so that's next week, I guess. It's on the thing. It's on the website. I don't have to guess. I can just look it up. Hello. So you do have a little bit of time to get started on that, and actually a lot of what we're going to be talking about today and Thursday is directly related to that assignment. So HTML means something, yeah, the 28th, which is next week, next Thursday. Yeah, it is different. That surprises me a little bit as well, but hey, that's what's going on. That's what we're doing. And you got another one, Web Caesar, due the following week. So, we're still going to have assignments. They're not going to be as frequent. You're not going to have chapter assignments for this unit. They're going to be more like the ones that you saw at the end of Unit 1, like the crypto and Visionaire kinds of things, right? So there will be fewer of them, but they'll be a bit more significant, is the idea. Are there any questions about logistics for Unit 2 or things like that before we hop into our first topic for the unit? Yes?
Did you just say we need to code along with you today?
Not today. We're not going to start that project until probably next week. But yeah, eventually I'm going to expect you to participate in the walkthroughs. We got some stuff we need to do this week to kind of lay the groundwork. But yeah, soon. Soon we'll be making a web app in class together as a group. And so every class is going to build off of what we did in the previous course, in the previous class. Is there another question I saw? Yeah. You can download Flask tonight. It's not on my agenda for today, although you certainly could. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing so. I don't remember exactly what day that appears on your to-do list. It might be Thursday. But I mean, it'll be pretty obvious when we get to that point what's required of you. I expect that we'll be doing most of the stuff regarding Flask starting next week, would be my, if I'm remembering things correctly. How the web works. Hello, Flask. Yeah, boom, there it is. That's next Monday's class that I'm looking at right now. So prep for class 3, 1 week from today. So yes, that is when Flask is going to come into play, and that's when we're going to start our web app that we're going to develop in class as well, starting next week. Any other questions about logistics before we hop into today's stuff? We good? All right, cool. Let's talk about the web. All right, let's start with some basics. What's HTML? The H is, or the H and the T kind of go together. Hypertext. Markup language. So those last two letters, markup language, I think are actually conveying a lot of information. A markup language is something that takes an existing set of stuff and just adds a little bit more to it. It annotates it, right? I'm adding additional information to something that already exists, some information that already exists. And so HTML is used for annotating the content that we want to be displayed on our websites in our browser. How do we want that stuff to look? What's the structure of the content that we want to be displayed in this web page? We use HTML for that purpose. It's been around for a very long time, a few decades by now at least. So let's talk about what HTML does for us. What's a tag? If I'm looking at a website, if I'm looking at code for a website, how do I know that I'm looking at a tag? Angle brackets, yeah, angle brackets. So angle brackets tell me that I'm working with a tag, and then every tag has to have an opening and a closing tag associated with it, right? What's an element? I'm sorry?
The tags and the content.
The tags and the content. So in between the opening and the closing tag, there might be some stuff. There might be some content. There might be some text, right? The content that you want your website to contain. So if I look at all of that as one unit, right? The tags and the stuff that comes in between those tags, that's considered to be an element. And then last but certainly not least, what's an attribute? Yeah, in the back. An action for the element? So where am I going to see it? Within the tag. Yeah, it'll be inside the tag. And so what does it usually look like? It looks like value equals whatever I want that to be, right? Whatever I want that value to have. What's an example of an attribute you saw? Source. SRC. What did we use that for? Images? Yeah, we use it for images. Which I want to put an image on the page. All right. Tell me where to find the picture that you want to put on this page. What's the source of this image, right? That's an example of an attribute. Do I need to have stuff in between my opening and closing tags? Is that required? No, it's not. In fact, sometimes, I don't know if you saw many examples of this in the prep work for today or not, but sometimes I'll have an opening tag and a closing tag all in one. I can just put the slash at the end, and that means that I'm closing that tag right away. Some tags will let me do that. Other tags, maybe it's inappropriate for me to do that. So let's start with some basics. We already talked about images. What's the image tag? IMG. Yeah. What about if I want to put a link in? It's an A. A stands for anchor. It's an anchor, right? And then how do I specify what I want that link to be? href, so hypertext reference. Whoa, sorry. What happened? I am going to turn this down a little bit. I guess I'm blowing up some speakers today. I don't know. Href. So what am I referencing? What do I want to link you to? And that's an example of what? Href? It's an attribute. Yeah, it appears inside of the anchor tag, inside of the A tag. Good. What if I want to put some white space in? What tags might I use for that purpose? Break. BR. That's going to be a line break, just moving down to the next line. What else? There's another one. Paragraph tag. A P tag means I'm starting a new paragraph, which inserts a blank line. Again, it's very similar to the BR tag. Very, very similar to the BR tag. In fact, we'll talk a little bit about the difference between those two tags on Thursday. They are very similar, but there are some subtle differences between the two, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. So we can do all kinds of stuff, bold, italics, right? Also pretty straightforward tags to use. This is by all means not anywhere near a comprehensive list of all the tags that are available to you, but these are some of the basics, some commonly used ones that we might see as we're going through our pages. All right, what's the difference between an inline tag and a block tag? Can somebody explain that to me? I'm sorry, go ahead.
So with an break,
Inline tag would be break, yeah.
block one would be paragraph,
Block one would be paragraph. So what's the difference?
inline over the same line as it suggests, and a block line will look like a block of text separate.
Keeps a block of text separate, yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. What in the back, did you have something to? You can give it a height and a width, so it actually has a size associated with it a lot of times. What's another example of a block tag? Div. Div's a very common example of a block tag. Div is really just a way of making different containers, different subdivisions of your website. And then I can take things that are inside of those div containers and treat them all in the same way. That's really what it is. It's a way of setting containers. What are some other block tags? Might have seen. Or some inline tags. Italics, bold, yeah, those are all example of inline tags. Yeah, they don't actually make a new block of anything. They just modify an existing line, right? Modify something in line. Whereas a div tag is actually creating a new container, a new unit, a new block that I can then put stuff into and manipulate as a single unit. Same with a p tag, right? It makes a new unit that I can manipulate. It's a subtle difference, but it's important. It has a very important effect on how your page layout will look, how your web page layout will actually look. So if I'm making a web page, I'm making an HTML document, there's a general structure that they all follow, right? What's the first thing that I expect to see in my HTML documents? I heard two different answers. I heard doc type. So what's the doc type about? What language we're using, or actually it's even a little bit more specific than that, like what version of a particular language am I using? What version do I expect to uphold, this document to be upheld to? And we can actually use that to verify our documents. It'll look at that doc type, and I can verify the contents of the rest of the document based on what the doc type says, and spit out either, yes, this is valid HTML code, it matches what the doc type tells me it is, or no, it's not. You included some funky tags in here that aren't part of what you told me the doc type was, or something like that. Or, in the old days, when websites were still kind of new, a lot of times closing your tags could be optional, like you didn't have to. You could, and you probably should, close your HTML tags, but it was a lot more optional back in the day, whereas these days, modern HTML says, no, every single tag must be closed. There must be a matching closing tag for every opening tag that you have. And the doc type would tell you, right, which version of HTML am I expecting to use here? The version that might let me be a little bit loosey-goosey with my closing tags, or the one that's going to be expecting very strict adherence to every opening tag must have a closing tag. These days, it's always going to be the latter, right? We're going to close all of our HTML tags every time. That's the modern standard. That's how the internet has evolved. All right, so doc type, what comes next? HTML tag. So that just goes around everything, right? I see it at the very beginning, and I see it at the very end. All right, what's next? Yeah, so we've got 3 different sections: header section, a body section, and a footer section. Do I need all 3? Not really, no. I'm often going to see at least 2 of those 3, though, right? Probably the head section and the body section are fairly common. You're going to see those on most pages that you work with. The footer section, less common, but still, not unusual to see it. And so, what are some things that might go inside of the header? Yeah. The title. So what's the title do? Uh-huh. Yeah, that's exactly right. If you have a browser up, which I do, the title is this, whatever's displayed inside of the tab. That's what the title tag is specifying. That's what it does. What else might I see in that header? Might see some CSS up there, and we'll do a little bit of that, but eventually we're going to say no, no, no to doing CSS in the header. But yes, you can. What else might I see? I'm sorry? Links to other resources. So if I want to load in something from somewhere else, a common example actually being CSS, right? We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but a little peek into the future. We can load in CSS files that way. What else? There's other stuff. I don't know if the prep work covered much else actually, but fonts is part of CSS. There's another category that I don't think was covered much in the prep work, if at all, but you still might see it in the header. Something called metadata. Yeah, mentioned it but didn't talk about it a whole lot. Does anybody have an idea about what that's referring to? What it's used for? It's information about your website. So why? So the search engines can help get your website in the proper place. Have you ever wondered about that, thought about that? How does Google know when I type these words into the box? How does it know to find those pages? That's one way. It's not the only way that Google uses to do that, but it is one way that Google uses to specify your search results by matching what's the website says it is in the metadata. Now, obviously, people can do strange or even malicious things by lying in the metadata, trying to represent themselves as something that they're not, right? So it's not the definitive source that Google uses, but it certainly is a source that Google uses for that purpose. Cool. And then, so we talked about the header. The body, I feel like, is probably the most self-explanatory, right? What do I see in the body? I see the stuff. What do I want my webpage to have on it? It's just the stuff. It's all the possible content of my page. And then what kinds of things typically go in a footer?
Maybe you're doing some kind of totals or something.
Totals? I heard copyright. I often see that down in the footer. Yeah. Contact. Yeah. Privacy policy. All the legal, like, here's a very small link to take us to the legal stuff that nobody's going to read, right? That's what goes down in the footer, right? All that stuff typically is what shows up down in the footer. Cool. Any questions about that, the structure of a basic web page? All right. And so let me go back here. What is HTTP? Anybody know? Yeah. Exactly right. Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. Hypertext transfer protocol. So it's how the internet communicates. Simply, quite simply. Again, I'm sort of deviating a little bit off track, but with how much the prep work went into detail on these things. But the internet, we all act as we call it a client-server relationship. So which one are we? Are we the clients or the servers? We're the clients. We're the consumers, right? The websites themselves are on the servers. And where are the servers? I don't know. They're somewhere. Probably in a big warehouse somewhere, right? That's where the websites are stored. So when I want to go visit a website, what happens? I make a request. I send out a request to the internet that says, hey, I want to see Google. Please go find Google for me. And so that request gets sent across the internet and it gets routed to the server that has Google on it, right? Google's servers are probably out in California somewhere, although I'm sure they have lots of them spread out across the world these days. So your request makes it to Google's servers and Google says, oh, hey, you want to see Google? Well, here you go. Here's Google. Here's the web page, and it takes the web information and it sends it back to me. Usually along the same route that it took to get there. And then my browser grabs that information that the server sent and it shows it to me. And then I can type in a search in the box, and guess what? That makes another request. It says, I want to search for cat GIFs. All right. Google will do a search for cat GIFs and then show me, send me the results back. That's how the internet works. And the hypertext transfer protocol is what governs that communication between the client and the server. How do they communicate? Yeah.
I don't know if this question's off base, but like, who established that protocol?
Yeah, that's a great question. Who established the hypertext transfer protocol? And so actually a lot of these things are governed by a standards body these days. There's not just one person that's in charge of it. It's a whole group of experts who are in charge of how the internet, which includes HTTP and also HTML and even CSS kinds of issues, how they evolve over time. So I believe they're called the World Wide Web Consortium, if I'm remembering correctly. And if you're interested, you can actually go online and see what they are doing. You can look at RFCs. They're called RFCs, which is request for comments. Thank you. And so you can see Google is suggesting some. I believe these are probably very famous ones, right? Address allocation for private internets. That sounds fascinating. I don't know what this is about. I've never read this. Specifies best current practices for the internet community. All right, cool. And so anytime that a change is proposed or accepted to make a new version of HTML or update the hypertext transfer protocol, they're going to send out one of these RFCs that basically is an open publication saying, this is what we want to do. If you don't like this or you want to complain about it, here's your chance. And if nobody complains too loudly, then it becomes what happens. It's the thing. Yeah. Well, who cares? Who cares, right? Who cares about this stuff? I do computer science for a living, and I care very little about these kinds of things. It's above my pay grade to worry about this kinds of stuff. The World Wide Web Consortium, I don't even know how many people are even involved in that particular body, but they're the ones, yeah. Do people get elected? I honestly don't know. I have no idea. World Wide Web Consortium. International community that develops standards. Yeah, I mean that's what this body does. How many people are involved? I have no idea. Maybe Wikipedia knows. Facts. People. Oh, Tim Berners-Lee. Yeah. Who invented the internet? Not Al Gore. It was Tim Berners-Lee. It's this guy. So, inventor of the World Wide Web. So these people, are they on it? Yeah, sure. We'll say they are. I don't know. Probably. They're helping out. It is, it's all open though. I'm making fun of it, but it's actually a very open organization. They publish everything that they do. They aren't trying to be secretive about what changes are being made. And there's good reason for that. In the early days of the internet, there were no standards. People were just out there doing whatever the heck they felt like, and they weren't telling other people about it either. And so things would break, and somebody would get upset about it, and it's like, well, too bad. Oh well, I'm going to do things my way. And by, I'm talking back in the early days of the internet right now. Like, when did the internet start being a thing?
30 years ago.
The 80s? I think it even goes farther back than the 80s. I want to say 70s. Its origins are in DARPANET, which was a United States government-funded network of various research universities across the country. And at first, there were only a very small number of universities on the network. 1958, wow, even farther back than I thought. Yeah. Goes back a long time. Goes back longer than you expect. When did the internet exist as far as we're concerned? Probably like the 90s is when most people remember first thinking about the internet, right? That's when I first remember thinking about the internet, and I was in elementary school at the time. So, and that's kind of crazy too. My kid's gonna grow up and never know what it's like to not have the internet. That's bizarre, but it's true. So yeah, this stuff's been around for a long time. The policies that are in place have been actually argued over for many, many, many decades. And even though it feels like the internet's this not super brand new anymore, but it's been around for 20, 25 years in the public mind. It's actually been around a lot longer than that, and people have been arguing about it for a lot longer than that. And the standards that govern it today started a lot before the public had access to the internet. So yeah, there's a really deep history there if you're ever interested in looking into it. I've read a few of those RFCs before. They're good bedtime reading material because they will put you to sleep. Great questions. I feel like we went off on a tangent, but that's okay. Any other questions that I can answer before we move on, switch gears and talk about something a little different? Any other questions? All right. So the internet wasn't the only thing that you had on your to-do list for today. We also gave you some information about version control. So what the heck is that? What is version control? A way to keep track of changes. That's a brilliant, simple way to put it, and it's exactly correct. How many of you have been in this situation where you're at work maybe or doing something and you've got like an Excel spreadsheet, right? And you're doing some stuff on this spreadsheet, and then somebody else also needs to do some work on that spreadsheet. So maybe you email it to them, right? You give them your copy, and then they make some changes, but then you're like, oh wait, I also needed to add some other stuff to it. And then now what? Now I've got two different versions of that same spreadsheet, and they may or may not agree with each other, right? Maybe the stuff is okay, maybe it's not. How do I decide how to stitch those two back together? It's not a fun situation to be in. Version control doesn't solve that problem, but it does provide a path. It does provide tools to help manage that situation. Why do we use it? We use it because we're not programming in a vacuum anymore. I'm not programming by myself anymore as much. I'm programming with other people. I'm collaborating with other people, and you will too. And we use version control so that when I make changes and somebody else also makes those changes, that it keeps a record of those changes and helps us determine, oh wait, there's some kind of a conflict here. You both changed the same thing in two different ways. You got to make a decision. It helps illustrate those kinds of points. That's not the only thing it's good for, though. What else might we use version control for? There's lots of stuff it can do for us. Backup. I make a change and it stinks. It doesn't work. It broke the whole thing. Well, guess what? Version control remembers every single version that you tell it to remember. So if I add something and then decide a week later that this isn't any good, or I don't want to do it this way anymore, I can go look at how things were a week ago, as long as I told it that I wanted to take a snapshot at that point, right? As long as I told it to do that. And I can go back. I can undo all those changes and go back to how it was a week ago without having to remember, like, oh, which of those things did I change? Like, I don't have to remember that. It remembers it for me. It can undo all those changes. So it's a great tool. So how do we put files into a repository? So this is getting a little bit more down into the practical details now. Let's say I have we're using Git, right, for version control. We had you install Git recently, as a matter of fact. So I have a Git repository. How do I put stuff into it? What do I use? I'm sorry? Git init, so that makes a new repository. How do I actually put stuff into it? Add is the key word there. So I say git add, and then I add whatever files. After that, I just list out whatever files I want to be put into that repository. So once I do that, once I say git add, does that mean that it's going to remember the versions for all those things and I'm good to go? No. When I say git add, what's actually happening is I'm telling Git that I care about these things, and it begins to watch them. It starts to watch those files for changes. But if I actually want to record, I think of it as like a snapshot, right? I've got files that are changing over time, and at periodic times, I want to create a little snapshot. everything's working pretty well right now. Maybe it's not 100% completed, but all the code works pretty well, and I'm happy. It's sort of a natural stopping point. I'm going to take a little snapshot right now so that it remembers this point. It remembers my progress up until this point, so that I can come back here if I need to. Or if somebody else breaks something, right, I can come back here if I need to. What's that called? That's a commit. That's a commit. So when I say git commit, what does it do? It looks at all of the files that you told it to watch. We told it which files to watch by using add, right? It looks at all of those files that I told it to watch, and it sees if they've changed at all since the last time I did a commit. Did file A change at all from the last time I did a commit to the time that I'm doing a commit right now? If the answer is yes, it's going to record those changes. If the answer is no, it's got nothing to do. That's an easy one. So it just tracks all of the changes across all of the files every time I do a commit. That's why it's important to make sure you're committing on a regular basis. A lot of times I see people, they'll be working on a project, they've got a repository set up and everything. How often do they commit? Once. At the very end, when everything is done, they'll commit one time. Okay. What happens if your computer crashes between now and then? What happens if, you spend the last week actually going in the wrong direction and now you need to back up, right? If you just commit once at the very end, you've got nowhere to fall back on. You have nothing to fall back on. You have to either remember what you did and go back and manually undo it, which might be easy or might be extremely difficult, depending on how much stuff you've done. Or you take periodic snapshots, you take periodic commits of your code and use those as ways of reverting your work, looking back through your work. It really is a lifesaver. I feel pretty confident in saying that all of you will probably run into a situation, even with using Git, that you're going to lose some of your work. It happens to everybody. It happens to me. It happened to me somewhat recently. I wasn't committing enough, and I lost a chunk of work. I was pretty upset about it. It only takes a couple times of doing that, though, for you to learn that, hey, committing is actually a very good thing. I should be doing it on a somewhat frequent basis. There are some rules, though, right? I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but there are some things we want to avoid. I oftentimes don't like committing code that's broken. So if I'm going to make a commit, I really want things to be in good shape. If I'm committing something, I'm saying this is in a good enough state that I could give it to somebody else and it would just work, right? It would just do what it's supposed to do without them having to fiddle around and fix a whole bunch of problems. So it's really just, it really has a big effect on how you code, on how your programming flow works. I'm going to write a little bit of code. I'm going to test it really well to make sure that it works, and then I'm going to commit it. I'm going to write a little bit more code. I'm going to test it really well to make sure that it works the way I want it to, and then I'm going to commit that. And instead of making these massive changes to my program, I'm just going to incrementally add on little bits at a time, right? That's a good programming flow that we'll get into in this class as well. Are there any questions about that? We're just scratching the surface of Git right now. We're going to be talking about Git a lot in Unit 2, and version control a lot in Unit 2. Are there any questions about some of these simple basics for now? We'll get some more practice doing it probably on Thursday, actually. Get some more time to practice our Git skills. All right, so I do have a little bit of a walkthrough for you today. Today's a little bit different since we're just getting started on Unit 1. So today's walkthrough is more of an introduction to how to develop using the tools that you can find in your browser. So I'm going to switch gears real quick. I'm actually using Firefox today, and I'll be honest with you, Firefox is not my default browser. I actually use Chrome more often, but all of the resources for this course were written with Firefox in mind, and so I'm going to use Firefox to stay consistent with the course materials. You are adult human beings. You can make your own decisions. If you want to use Firefox, cool. If you want to use Chrome or some other browser instead, because that's what you use on a regular basis, that's fine by me. Just be aware that it's going to be a little bit different. Chrome, for a fact, I know can do everything that we're going to do with Firefox. No problem. It's not going to have any issues. It's just a little bit different. It just looks a little bit different. The keys might be a little bit different, so you're going to just have to learn how to use it. Other browsers, I'm not so sure about. I would say, though, please don't use whatever they call Microsoft's browser. Edge, okay. I like Microsoft for a lot of things. That's not one of them. If you're using Microsoft Edge, I would highly encourage you to stop doing that, at least for the purposes of this class, and maybe even for the purposes of bettering your life. I don't know. I don't know how much of that is just past stigma from how awful it used to be, and maybe they fixed it, but nobody's ever going to take them seriously because it was that bad, right, in the past. Oh, are they? Yeah. Well, I mean, people are still going to make fun of it. It doesn't really matter what they do at this point. It was that bad. It was really bad. And, people are never going to forget that, at least not during my lifetime. So I hope they do make it better eventually. But Chrome or Firefox are the two that I would recommend. There are plenty of others out there that you could consider using. But those are the two that I would highly, highly recommend. And so what I want to show you, so today's studio, we're going to have you using these developer tools actually in today's studio as well. I want to show you how to peek under the hood. You've been able to do this, the whole time you've been using a browser. These tools have been available to you, but I don't know how many people have actually taken the time to poke around at them. Something that I feel like a lot of people probably have done is you can right-click on any web page and go to View Page Source, right? So I can go to, this is LaunchCode's site for today's studio. I can say View Page Source, and then here we go. This is the HTML for today's studio page. And we may not have seen every single one of these tags before, right? But we've seen a lot of them, and we can kind of infer what's going on for the ones that we haven't necessarily seen. There's some stuff going on here that we haven't really talked about yet, and we'll talk about that more as we go along, but we can see, all right, there's a lot of links, right? That makes sense. What are these links? These links are, classes, studios, tutorials, assignments, right? So these are these links, right? I'm looking at this menu right now, apparently. And so I can go through and I can actually see, the whole content of this page, right? Okay, so that's all nice. That's cool, and it's a useful tool, but we want to be able to do more. We're going to be designing web applications. We're going to be designing code that's running on our browsers, on the internet. So I actually need to do a little bit more than just look at the code. I want to be able to manipulate the code and see how those changes are going to affect my website, right? So I need to have a little bit more control. And Firefox and Chrome provide us with this control, right? I can actually go and open up the web developer tools, which are down here. And you can see there's a whole bunch of different options available. But the one that I'm primarily interested in for today is going to be the inspector. And so the inspector is a super, super useful tool. I can hover over part of the page and it will highlight. You can see in the lower left, let me see if I can zoom in the website, but can I zoom this in? No, of course not. Anyway, right, it'll highlight the part of the website that, the part of the HTML that is covering that part of the page, right? So I hover over the title and I can see in the lower left that the H1 tag, the header tag, is highlighted because that's what this part of the website is, right? And I can do that with other parts of the website. Hover over it and it'll show me. So this is a fun thing to do. It's a fun thing to take a look at. You can go to a website like, this is the Google homepage, probably one of the most commonly visited pages on the internet, if not the most commonly visited page on the internet. It looks relatively simple, doesn't it? There's a picture, there's always a little picture here, there's a search box, a couple of buttons, and some links, right? Some links at the top and some links at the bottom. Let's take a quick peek under the hood and see what this actually looks like in code real quick. Well, that's a little misleading. Let me right-click and view source real quick instead, just to show you. Oh, here we go. I can zoom in on this just so you can get a full unfettered view of this beautiful, beautiful code. Does this even look like HTML to you? It's JavaScript. Oh, there's some HTML. Hey. A very small amount of HTML and a whole lot of not HTML. There's a little bit of HTML, right? There's a little bit of HTML, right? So Google, even though the site looks fairly simple, is actually much, much, much more complicated. Maybe that surprised you, maybe it didn't. But kind of goes to show you what modern web design has become. I don't know about any of you, but the internet became big when I was a kid, and in high school I would make simple little websites. Back in the 90s, right? In the early 2000s, I'd make simple little websites, and I could actually sit down and write HTML and make a website, right? That's how web development, that's how a lot of web development worked back then. If you could sit down, you knew HTML and CSS well enough, you could code up a little website. That's not really true anymore. Modern websites, you need a bit more than that. So you can take a blast to the past if you want to. This is actually the Space Jam website for the movie Space Jam from 1996. It is still up. I don't know why, but it is. This is what websites used to look like, right? In the 90s. This is what they used to look like. You can click on these links. I think they still work. Do they? Oh yeah, they do. Oh yeah. Oh, there's Michael Jordan. Yeah. Played for the Bulls. Right? This is not a modern website, but I like to show it to people because, let's take a look at the source of this one and compare it to what Google looked like. And you can see that, all right, there's still a little bit of the JavaScript stuff going on here, right? But for the most part, it's actually pure HTML. This is HTML. Like you or I, if we wanted to, could sit down and write this ourselves without a whole lot of help, right? That's how these websites used to work. So these days, it's a little bit more than that. We actually are going to bring code into the picture. We're going to bring Python into the picture specifically to help us determine how we want a page to be displayed. What content do we want on that page? And that's Unit 2, basically in a nutshell. How do we take HTML and CSS in conjunction with a more complicated language like Python and use that to create websites? Because think about this. Can I write loops in HTML? Or if statements? Or functions? Nope. HTML does not have those kinds of capabilities. So if I want to design websites that need those kinds of capabilities, I have to bring another language into it, like Python. So HTML is going to tell us how our stuff is formatted, how it looks, and Python will be used to help us define the behaviors, how our website acts when we look at it. So, you can take a peek at this. And then back to the developer tools, one of the cool things you can do, so if I open up the developer tools on the Space Jam page, right? I'm going to go down here and look at this text. It says Space Jam. Can I zoom in on that so we can actually see? It's a dark background too. I know that makes it harder to see, and the highlighting is making it worse. It says Space Jam characters' names and all related media or copyright, trademark, whatever, Warner Brothers, right? I'm going to click on that guy, and it highlights the HTML down here, and I can actually see here's the HTML for that particular set of text. And then I can come in here and say, this is my favorite movie. Actually, it's not, but it's one of my favorite movies. My parents took me to see it in 1996, and it was great. And you can see that the changes that I typed into the box appear on the website. But if you go here and look at this, are you going to see those changes? No. You hope not. Think about how crazy that would be if anybody could open up any website that they wanted and just start typing stuff in there. They can, but nobody else can see it. So what does that tell you, right? These websites, they live on servers, but when I make a request, when I want to go visit a website, they send me a copy. I'm looking at a copy. I'm looking at a copy of that website. It's on my computer. It's my own copy for me to interact with, however I see fit. And if I want to go in there and fiddle with the code, there's nothing stopping me, right? The original copy is still sitting on the server, so anybody else who visits the website, that's what they're going to get. But I can sit here and play around with my own copy all day long. This is great for development purposes, right? We want to make websites. I want to be able to do things like go into the HTML, go into the CSS, make some changes, and then see how that's going to affect what my website looks like, what the content's going to be. So these developer tools are extremely, extremely useful. Viewing the source, of course, is useful as well, but I can't manipulate it that way. If I want to manipulate the contents, I have to go in through the developer tools. And as you can probably see, there are a lot more things that these developer tools provide to us that we are not going to get to today. We'll start introducing these over time as we progress farther and farther into this unit. But for now, all we've really done is HTML and a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of CSS. So being able to use the inspector to examine the source and manipulate things is a good first step. So it's not just limited to changing text, right? I could go into one of, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I could go, change where one of these links takes you by swapping out the address. Or these are pictures. I could actually swap these pictures out for something else if I wanted to. I just have to find where they are in the HTML, which again, the inspector will help me do, right? All right, so this picture is right here. If I change this image to something else, if I go look up, I'm going to Google something very safe. I hope. All right, I'm just going to grab the first one. That's a nice looking cat. Cat's pictures. No, I just want to see the picture, though. I don't want to see a page of, well, I mean, I do want to see a page of cat pictures, but copy image location is another good one. So it'll copy the image location, and I can go back to here, and I can replace this. I can replace the source of this image with the one that I just pulled. Boom. All right. And so at this point, it's up to your imagination, right? What do you want to change? What do you want to manipulate? How do you want to bend this website to your will? It's up to you how far you want to take it. That's the subject of today's studio. Today's studio is called Fake News. And you're going to go to a news website, and you're going to make up a headline. Here's an example. Headline from the New York Times. This actually happened. Nellie was here a few years ago. I was there too. There's me. Hey, what's up? It's right over there. It happened. Of course, the New York Times doesn't care, but we made it look like they do. We inserted a picture and changed the headline to make it look like Nellie coming to Launch Code was front page news of the New York Times. Your task for today is to do something similar. Go to the New York Times or CNN or whatever news website you want. I don't care. Doesn't matter. And make up your own headline. Mess around with the HTML. Dig in. Mess around with the HTML. Figure out where they're storing that information and come up with your own headline. And then once you are done, once you've got it up and running and you're happy with how it looks, you can take a screenshot. And there's a channel on Slack called Showcase. I'm actually going to open that channel and leave it open during class. I'm actually not part of Showcase yet, but let me do that. Showcase. Oh, already taken. No, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to join a channel. Sorry. Showcase. Here we go. So you can join the Showcase channel. I'm going to leave this up on the screen. When you make a cool headline, you want to show it off, take a screenshot, post it on the Showcase channel, and we can all laugh at whatever weird stuff you guys come up with in class today. Are there any questions before I let you guys take off? Any questions? Yeah.
That spec thing you're using, is that just for exploring, and can you actually save a version of that?
Can you actually save a version? Oh, that's a great question. So once I've made the changes, right, I can actually right-click and save page as,
So you can save that cap.
and it'll save. Yeah, it'll save the page as I've modified it. I'm fairly certain. I mean, one way we could verify that is to go into view the page source and see, does it have the cat picture, or does it have, you know? Actually, it doesn't. It doesn't have the cat picture. It just has. It still has the sitemap. So, well, let's try a different way then, right? I'm sure there's a way to do it.
Maybe you don't really use that for programming, though.
So no, I mean, at the end of the day, right? So what's the workflow look like? It's a good question. I make changes in the inspector to get things how I like, but then I have to go back to the code and actually put them in the code to make them permanent. So this is more like a trial and error kind of piece, right? I can do a little bit of guess and check to see how I can get things working the way that I want, and then once I'm satisfied, I can put those changes permanently into my code. This is not something that we use for permanent things that we want to be done permanently. It's a good question, though. It's a good question. Any other questions before I get off the stage? Yeah, what's up, Gary?
I just wanted to share with everybody that when you're in the Git command line window, if you hold the shift key down and hit the up arrow, you can actually scroll up and see what's going on with what you did up above.
Oh, okay. So the tip was in the command line. If you actually don't even need the shift key. If you just hit the up and down arrows,
I think if you hit the up and down arrows, you get an array of commands.
If I hit the up and down arrows, I get a history of what I've done in the past.
Right, but if you hold the shift key down, you'll actually scroll up and see what the output's been put up.
Oh, I see. So you're saying if I got a whole bunch of stuff on the screen, I can hold shift
Say you
and...
want to see what happened.
I got you. Good tip. Yeah, good tip. Anything else? Yeah, what's up? How long does it hold? So if I refresh this page, it's all gone. It's back to normal now. Yeah, it's very temporary. Very, very temporary. And it's meant to be. It's not meant to be a permanent change. Yep. So grab a picture or, you know, find a way to copy paste your code out of here, which I'm sure you can copy, right? So copy paste your code out of there if you want to keep the code for later. Something like that. Because as soon as you navigate away from this page, it's gone. Good question. Any other questions? All right. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. I'm going to let you break up into your groups. Also, too, today, if you haven't done so already, it's a good time to get caught up on installing the stuff that we asked you to. So if you need help with that, didn't get a chance to do it, today would be a good day to do that as well.